Okay, I'm trying to get through all the dragons that fought in the Dance of the Dragons. I'm not going to spoil anything for the actual dance, but I will be talking about the history of the dragon beforehand. So, this video, I want to talk about the dragon Caraxes. The dragon Caraxes was born before 72 AC, which I know isn't a very narrowed down date, but George wasn't good at giving exact dates for most dragons' births, to be honest. Caraxes was nicknamed the Bloodworm for his huge, lean, red frame, and he would only have 2 riders in his lifetime, Aemon Targaryen and Daemon Targaryen. The Bloodworm would see a lot of action in his time. After being knighted, Prince Aemon, King Jaehaerys I Targaryen and Alysane's 3rd child, claimed the Bloodworm in 72 AC. At the time of him claiming Caraxes, the dragon was considered to be the fiercest of the young dragons in the dragon pit by the dragon keepers, the guards of the dragons in the dragon pit. In fact, they were actually the ones that nicknamed him Bloodworm. Upon Aemon claiming Caraxes, he rode the skies above King's Landing on its back. In a bit of sadness, Prince Baelon would later claim Vhagar and ride her to Dragonstone to surprise Aemon and Caraxes. Prince Aemon would use Caraxes to stop the Dornish fleet during the Fourth Dornish War. In 83 AC, it was known that the Dornish were planning an attack on Storm's End. Something Lord Baratheon was even prepared for. He was pumped up. He was going to stop these Dornish. However, Aemon, his brother Baelon, and father Jaehaerys all rode their dragons to the Stormlands to meet the Dornish and ended up just destroying Prince Martell's entire fleet before it could even come to land and attack. Despite the Dornish firing scorpion bolt after scorpion bolt at the dragons, they bounced off the dragon's scales, rarely hitting the dragons, and when doing so, not even mortally wounding them. The 3 dragons lit the Dornish ships on fire, and it was said by the time the sun went down, it looked like 100 candles floating on the sea. Due to Caraxes and the other dragons, the war was fought and won in one day, and there were no casualties to the Targaryen side. The Dornish side, not a single one of them made it to shore. Well, they did eventually make it to shore. Their charred corpses washed up on Cape Wrath for half a year. This war sent a clear message, and for a while, the 3 sisters and Stepstones were a bit more well-behaved. Well-behaved for 9 years, to be exact. In 92 AC, those of Myr decided to start shit in an event called the Mirrish Bloodbath. This bloodbath started in 91 AC on Myr between 2 factions, and when one faction lost, they ended up fleeing to the Stepstones. However, they were then chased from the Stepstones, so in search of a new home, they landed on the island of Tarth and took over the eastern side of the island. Obviously, this could not be allowed, and the Iron Throne had to come to the Stormlands' aid. Sadly, this is a conflict where Caraxes lost his rider. Aemon thought that his dragon, who he claimed to love to burn things and people, yikes, would be enough with other forces that were coming. Caraxes with Aemon arrived on Tarth and met Lord Cameron Tarth at his camp. While Aemon and Lord Tarth planned an attack, Caraxes fed on half a dozen goats. And this actually was what led to Aemon's death. The smoke from Caraxes' dragonfire made the camp not so hidden anymore, and a pair of Mirrish scouts came silently upon the location. The scouts meant to hit Cameron Tarth with a bolt, but instead they missed and hit Aemon's throat, causing him to bleed out. It is unknown how Caraxes responded to his rider's death, but as dragons are very attached to their rider, I would assume that he mourned. Prince Daemon Targaryen would become the next and last rider of Caraxes. He would use Caraxes for his travels to Essos, the Stepstones, and of course from King's Landing to Dragonstone and vice versa. Daemon even took his mistress on Caraxes' back when he left King's Landing and went to Dragonstone while just completely pissed at his brother King Viserys I. Of course, Daemon would also use Caraxes to fly to the Vale when his brother made him return to his wife, who he lovingly called his bronze bitch. Poor Caraxes would once again get embroiled in drama when Daemon took a second wife without his brother, the king's permission. Because Daemon knew that his brother would be PO'd, he decided to take his new bride, who had her own dragon, Vhagar, no less, across the sea to Essos. Now, there are some rumors that they actually went to Valyria. It's said that Daemon laughed in the face of the curse that supposedly grips that land and that he wanted to study more of the Dragon Lords. However, it's most likely they didn't actually go to Valyria and instead they just hit the cities in Essos. We know that Caraxes at the very least flew to Pentos, then the disputed lands, then to Old Volantis, and afterwards Caraxes went up the Rhoyne River to go to Qohor and Norvos. Cute enough, every time they entered any Essos city, Vhagar and Caraxes were just absolute stars, and people would come out in droves trying to get a glimpse of the dragons. So as Caraxes was going from each of these cities, with Daemon of course, he was just a complete superstar that everybody wanted to see. I wonder if he knew he was so popular. But Daemon didn't just use Caraxes for flying about and having fun, or marrying women without his brother's permission, or taking on a mistress he doesn't approve of. No, Daemon also used Caraxes for war. Prince Daemon used Caraxes during the War of the Stepstones in 106 AC. Lord Corlys Velaryon had talked with Daemon about plans to end the Triarchy's control of the Stepstones, which Daemon was all willing to do. With Corlys Velaryon leading his impressive fleet of ships, and Daemon commanding the army, and of course riding on his badass dragon Caraxes in 106 AC, Daemon had easily recruited men to fight in the war, and spent the next 2 years winning victory after victory on the Stepstones and against the three sisters who controlled it. Caraxes got a lot of experience killing and burning people alive during this war, but finally, after 5 years of burning people alive and eating them, Caraxes flew Daemon back to King's Landing in 111 AC during a tournament. Daemon, being a little bit arrogant, flew the bloodworm over the tourney grounds 3 times before landing before the king, his brother. Caraxes and Daemon remained in King's Landing for 6 months, and in that time, every single day, he would go riding with his niece Rhaenyra, with her on her own dragon, Syrax, and of course Daemon on Caraxes, and they would race all the time to see which dragon could get to Dragonstone first. By the Dance of the Dragons, Caraxes was half the size of Vhagar, who was absolutely enormous, and of the young dragons, Caraxes was 3 times bigger than all of them. Okay, so that was Daemon's dragon that we will see in House of the Dragon. Like, subscribe, come back for more sci-fi fantasy.